I'm Josée Boulanger.
And I'm Véronique Di Loreto, and this is the Family Matters Cooperative three-part broadcast-style series on growing independence.
In this mini-series, we will explore practical and innovative approaches that are relevant to people with developmental and intellectual disabilities and their families.
Welcome to the Growing Independence series. In today's episode, we explore the topics of housing.
So today we're chatting with Martha Beach. Hi, Martha.
Hi, Josée. Hi, Veronique.
So
Hi.
Could you tell us a bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. I'm the housing navigator, the DSO housing navigator for the East region. And what housing navigators do is we provide information and resources to people who would like to create individualized and independent housing plans.
And I'm Josée Boulanger, and I'm here today as a sibling.
I'm Véronique Di Loreto, and I'm here as a self-advocate.
And before we get started, I thought I would just say a few words about growing independence. So sometimes we hear the word independence and we think it might mean doing things on our own without anyone's help. But in reality, none of us do things without the help of others. So we depend on bus drivers, city workers to maintain roads and collect garbage, on doctors and nurses when we get sick, and community centers. We depend on teachers for learning and bakers for fresh bread. So many things we do and the freedom we enjoy depends on the work of others. We don't think about this much because it's become normal to access these services and resources in our communities. People labeled with an intellectual or developmental disability also depend on those same services and supports, but to enjoy the same kind of freedom and independence, they need more direct kinds of human support. Some might need a few hours of personal support per week, while others need ongoing daily support. And living independently can also mean accessing income supports to cover the cost of living. Regardless of how often or how much support a person needs with the right kind and amount, everyone can do things they find meaningful and create their own unique life.
Based on your experience, what does living independently look like for people with developmental intellectual disability?
Well, independent living looks different for everyone, including people who are not living with a disability, but it should always include opportunities to contribute to one's community and to be included and valued for their contributions. And I think by planning and skill building, a person with a developmental disability can enjoy a fulsome and inclusive life that relies not only on paid supports, but natural supports as well.
And Martha, so in your work as a housing navigator, what do you see are the existing options for living independently with supports in the community?
Well, aside from the traditional MCCSS funded supports, for example, home shares and so on, there's also options through the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. So applying for rent geared to income housing, for affordable housing or social housing benefits, for affordable housing. So there's a number of options available.
And how would you describe the current situation of housing in the Ottawa area?
Well, it's really difficult these days to find housing in general, and definitely affordable housing even more so. So although there's new developments that will increase affordable housing stock, such as at LeBreton Flats, where they're going to be creating 601 new housing units and 40% of them will be affordable, it will be years before these new units are available. We're seeing more portable housing benefits. And again, while providing greater choice for renters, it's also affected by the lack of supply. So having the funds to pay rent is great, but when there's no supply, it's not particularly helpful. And we're seeing regeneration of existing rent-geared income areas that are creating more diverse and inclusive communities. But again, this takes time, and it could be years before we see the effect of the increase of units.
Have you noticed changes in housing options since the beginning of the pandemic?
I don't know if I've noticed changes in housing options, but if we didn't already know the value of having a home of one's own, I think the pandemic has certainly made that clear. It's highlighted the vulnerability, especially of the homeless population. And we know from the point in time homelessness survey that people with a developmental disability make up a significant percentage of the homeless population.
So I would like to invite Lisa Reitzel from Elmira District Community Living to tell us about a unique program they launched called Trying It On for Size.
Hi, so I'm Lisa Reitzel from Elmira District Community Living, and I'm here to talk to you about our Trying It On for Size program. So we started it about 14 years ago. We received funding from the Ministry of Children and Community Social Services, and that allowed us to open up an apartment that at the beginning, we just rented, and we hired a full-time primary staff to work in the program. And what would happen is we would offer the opportunity for individuals to come and try living independently and away from home. So it started off, the program, it ran for a year, and the person would come incrementally for longer and longer stays. We found that it was more effective to run it as a 6-month program. So we changed that about 5 years ago. And the first 3 months, we fully staffed somebody 24 hours a day for 2 nights and 3 days, and they come for 1 stay a month. And during that time, it's an opportunity for us to evaluate somebody's safety skills and their skills around that they would need for living independently. At the 3-month mark, we meet with the social supports for that person. So whoever they're connected with the community, their family, and we all come together and we talk about the safety aspect. And if there's strong safety skills, then we move on to the next 3 months portion of the stays, where we have staffing for 8 hours, and the rest of the time the individual is there by themselves. And it provides an opportunity for them to explore what it would feel like living alone independently in an apartment, and what kind of skills they have in taking initiative to have those community connections. And we certainly support the development of those skills. During the whole 6-month period, we are evaluating skill sets and kind of identifying areas where people are really strong and areas where they may need some ongoing assistance until they become stronger. And at the end of the 6 months, we provide an evaluation tool, and that can be used as part of the process of looking at living independently. We've had many different individuals with varying skill sets come through our program over the years. Oftentimes, it's a testing ground to see, is this what I really want? We've certainly run individuals coming with one other roommate and seeing, are we a good fit together? Could we live independently together? And this way, they're not tied into a lease. It provides them the opportunity to see if their skill sets match together and if they want to live with that person. And that's been helpful, and we've certainly seen some successes come through that. And the goal of the program is to have an evaluation tool to take away. So it's a way for individuals to show their parents or guardians what they are capable of. So we remove all the cues and things that parents would naturally give during a day, because we wouldn't know those. And it's an opportunity for them to shine and to take on initiative and try new things, and have the opportunity to see if that's something they want to pursue. And we've found that it's about motivation more than skill set if someone is going to be successful living in the community. The people who really are motivated to make it happen are willing to put the time and the effort to succeed and to fill in the gaps with services so that they know they can succeed. We have had successes, and people are doing well living independently, and they have attributed the program to giving them the confidence to make that next step, because it's scary and it's a journey and a transition, and this kind of gave them permission to try, and that's been very successful. I would say for any families or advocates that are looking to pursue this avenue, it's really important to start at home, and it's getting that routine established at home that can be then transitioned to a new environment. So if someone has been making you breakfast all the time, it's pulling that back and providing the opportunities. Okay, now you're making that breakfast. It's the laundry. Okay, what day are you going to do laundry? That's now your official laundry day. And getting those skills and practice at home without prompts. Because when you're living out in the community, you may not have those prompts. Or if you do have prompts, that they become, instead of a person focused, they're more electronic focused. And looking at the different aspects that technology can play in helping you stay on track on your learning goals and for becoming independent.
So while trying it on for size is not available, to people outside of the Elmira district, Martha, what do you think we can learn from this program?
Well, what I think you can learn is that the program highlights how important it is to learn the skills or increase them so that a person can live independently. And it's an opportunity to evaluate where skill building may be required and to give both the person learning the skills and their parents or caregivers the confidence they need to move to independent living. A phrase I took away from that segment is when they said, it's the opportunity to take initiative. And I think that's really important. So although there may not be a program such as Trying It On for Size available in this area, there's many ways to determine how ready someone is for independent living and what skills need to be worked on.
What can family members do to help their sons and daughters get ready to live independently?
Well, there's a number of tools that family members can use to introduce skill building now while their children are still at home. So, for example, there's the Steps to Independence guidebook. And this is a digital questionnaire that helps people look at how prepared they are for semi-independent living. And once completed, it would provide a detailed report, and it will highlight the current skills, but also areas for possible improvement. And there's also something called the Tools for Assessment of Levels of Knowledge Home Alone. And this is an assessment tool that points out areas where a person could maybe benefit from building skills in order to stay alone safely. And I think introducing technology to where someone is living right now, not just when they move out, but now, such as recipe apps or even the Amazon Echoes and Google Homes that can help people with reminders. These are simple and inexpensive ways to encourage skill building.
Yes, and those are all very practical solutions for increasing independence and autonomy. Véronique, for you, what does independent living, what does it mean to you, and how does that, what would you like to say about independent living?
For me, independent living is, I have a social worker. She comes maybe once or twice a month, and she helps me with a budget or medical, if I have to go to a medical. She helps me with that, and with allergy, when I go to the allergy clinic, she will help me with that. And my eyes, she does that too. But independent living for me, it's like doing things by myself, but with a bit of support. But I do my own decisions. What makes me happy, what makes me want to accomplish things. So I think it depends for everybody, but for me, it's mostly to be more doing what I want to do.
having control over your life and having the freedom to make your own choices.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you find are the biggest barriers? Like what are the toughest parts?
For me, it could be like if I wanted like a company like Rogers or Bell, how does that work? Can they help me? Or like money wise, that can be hard too, because like you don't want to have a company and it's not working. So I find like when you have a good social worker that can help you with that, that can help. Or budgeting too, that can be hard. So you need support for that, and support for making sure you have the food that you need. Some people need more help, so for them is good for that. For me, I'm a bit more independent, so I do it. But yeah, so what can be hard it could be in relationships too. It could be like anything from cleaning or to go out and go buy clothes and getting being more responsible too. So yeah.
Thank you, Vero. Yeah, so it really depends on the person. It'll be different for everyone. And Martha, from your experience as a housing navigator, what kinds of barriers have you noticed families facing when looking for housing for their son or daughter?
Well, I mean, affordability always comes first, right? It's finding a place that a person can afford when their main source of income might be ODSP can be difficult. But again, there's programs in place that can help with that, such as the Canada-Ontario Housing Benefit. But also, it's not just about affordability. It's also, you know, the community that a person lives in and the inclusivity of that community. And so, you know, again, with a tight rental market, sometimes you're just lucky to find a place, let alone find a place where it suits your needs, that's close to the supports that you've already gained, you know, the natural supports that you have in place. So it's those are just some of the barriers, but there can be many, even accessibility barriers.
So I'd like to welcome to the show Chris and Pam to tell us about a roommate project they have been working on for their sons and daughters.
Hi, my name is Chris Snow, and I'm the mother of Owen LaFlamme Snow. He's 23 years old, and he has a developmental disability, and we're hoping to create a roommate project for him.
Yeah. And I'm Pam. I have a daughter, Kate, who's 23 as well, and she has Down syndrome. And I'll just add perhaps that Kate and Owen have known each other since they were in elementary school. They went to the same school, same class for years, and they got along well. They were absolutely best friends, soulmates in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. We have been lucky enough to have this wonderful young woman, Karina, in our life. She was a best buddy at Glebe High School when Owen was in high school. And she got to know him and his friends really, really well. And when she graduated from Glebe, she went to live in a L'Arche community in Belgium for a year. And when she came back to Ottawa, when we knew she was back and not in school yet, we thought, oh gosh, we've got to get Karina in our life because she's such a special young woman. And so she helped facilitate sort of a friend group for Owen and his friends during the lockdown. So she would spend Saturday afternoons with them outside doing activities. And after a few months of the regular Saturday afternoons, Karina shared with me this dream of hers to create a roommate project. So a L'Arche sort of idea. Where she and her friend that she met in Belgium, who also lived in their L'Arche community, would like to live here in Ottawa. They're both students and have roommates who have developmental disabilities. And so she was sort of sharing this dream with me and also asking me if I'd be interested in supporting her and helping her with it. And of course I was, and also very excited to have this opportunity just sort of present itself, because as you are parenting a child with a developmental disability, you always know the I guess the problem of trying to find somewhere for them to live independently is out there. And so when this wonderful opportunity presented itself, we were all so happy. And then it just so happened, it was quite a while later, like maybe even a year later, that I ran into Pam, and I just shared, sort of just chatting on the street about it. And then Pam reached out to me, I think even a few months later.
I came home and said, Doug, to my husband, housing project. He said, well, what do you know about it? Nothing, but let's do it.
Exactly.
So it was really, really right away, I think I realized that my goals for this would be that Kate would get an opportunity to test her independent skills. And what we're seeing right now is perhaps it's a 2-year timeline at this point, because the women are in university, they're going to graduate, and then realistically, we don't know what they're going to do after that. One of the reasons I was really attracted to this potential when I talked to Chris is that there actually is a deadline. We see having Kate and Owen living with Karina and Laura September 2022, because they are students and they need housing. So that is the deadline. And I love working towards deadlines. And if it doesn't happen, we've learned a lot.
Martha, when do you think families should start planning, and who might be able to help them get started?
Well, I think families should start planning as soon as possible and making connections with other families. You know, joining family groups or networks that can provide opportunities to meet other families at a similar stage in their lives. And also introducing community circles or networks of support, so that people other than family members are helping to encourage social inclusion and creating a plan for the future. Housing navigators can help people get started by providing information and resources, so they can provide connections to family networks and to family groups where they can, again, meet families who are at a similar stage in their life. They can also provide resources such as information on community housing and the value of applying early. There's a long wait for rent guaranteed income housing and affordable housing, so the sooner someone starts the application process, the better. So that's some of the help that could be provided.
And Martha, how do families find housing navigators?
Well, they can go to the Developmental Services Ontario website, so dsontario.ca. They can reach out locally to the DSO or to service coordination and find out who the housing navigators are through either one of those. We are getting more housing navigators in the East region, so people are always welcome to reach out to me to find out who the housing navigators are and their contact information.
Okay, and is it quite easy to access a housing navigator?
Yes, it is. I think as a rule, we try to respond, well, usually within a day. So there's not a wait list for us. We're usually just a phone call or an email away.
So now let's listen to Chris and Pam describe the steps they're taking to get this project started, their early successes and the barriers they are facing.
We looked at it and breaking it down into 3 parts. One part really is when you look for housing for kids like ours, you look for live-in support, and then bricks and mortar, and then financial support for the bricks and mortar in our case. So we feel like we're going into this obviously with the live-in support more or less taken care of. So then we broke it down between, okay, where are they going to live? Let's start calling around. What's out there in terms of bricks and mortar and financial support.
unfortunately, there really isn't a lot of affordable housing options for our kids.
One of the things that we're starting a campaign on is looking to see whether any universities would actually offer us student apartments in residence at a university. So I'm making lots of phone calls, and we're finding people who we know who's connected to universities and trying to get them to suggest who at the universities we might talk to, because one of the students is a University of Ottawa student, and we're hoping to have conversations about the four of them living in a university residence, and also off-campus student housing and co-ops. So anything that we may have to pay market rent, but it tends to be a lower market rent than your typical rental unit in Ottawa.
What is working is working together with Pam. And basically, when Karina first presented this project, I had a few meetings with people, but I didn't have a lot of momentum. But as soon as Pam got involved and we were sort of, sharing ideas and bouncing ideas off one another, and also sort of being accountable to one another. So meeting up a week later with what we had learned, or networking with other people and reporting back. I found that to be, it was just very motivating and very supportive. And what I also find is that finding the right person to work with, because through all the last few years of wondering about who we were going to, what other families we could potentially work with, Owen's actual friends, which obviously he's thought about living with, their families were not really that interested in this same idea. So they didn't have this dream for their children. And so there was no traction for us to be working with these other families. So as soon as Pam and I sort of became interested in this project, and we have the same sort of vision for our kids, it has really taken off in terms of learning and strategizing. And yeah. And then, of course, the other thing is that the women, Karina and Laura, they have connected with an organization called OCAB DD, and OCAB is really on board to support them in this project. So I would definitely say, that organization is a good one to get in touch with and make sure that you get everything you can that they have to offer.
It's the middle section, the bricks and mortar, that's still a struggle, and the financial support for that, which is there is none.
There's none. There
is nothing. And that was a very, very hard thing to hear over and over and over and over again, especially when we hear that housing is so critical right now and that so many levels of government are looking at it. And I'm not saying they're not looking at it, but what we're learning is that our children, people with the intellectual disabilities, are not a priority, not at all. And particularly in Ottawa, there are a number of the City of Ottawa has a number of housing initiatives, which I'm sure are great. But the waiting list is years and years long. And beyond the waiting list, there's also priority groups. And again, our children are not a priority for housing. So even if they were higher up on the waiting list, they're not a priority. One example I'll give you is a number of people, when I was calling all over the place, talking to anybody who knew anything about housing, a number of people said to me, you look into this Canada Ontario housing benefit. It's a brand new program, 2020. Not too many people know about it. Get your name in there. So when I called the city to find out if we could apply for that, which would be perfect, because what we're trying to do is bridge the gap between what our children earn and what they need to pay for rent. And this Canada Ontario housing benefit hit the bill. That's exactly what it would do. It would recognize that they don't make enough money to pay rent at the cost of rent these days. But when I called the City of Ottawa, I found out that people with intellectual disabilities cannot qualify for the program.
What kind of help is there for families looking for housing options beyond group homes or home share?
So again, probably the first step would be to reach out to a DSO housing navigator, because again, we can provide information on rent geared to income housing, but there's other opportunities as well. For example, if people are interested in home ownership, we can provide information on Habitat for Humanity. And we can also provide examples of what other families have tried. And sometimes that's inspirational. So for example, we have a webinar series called Inspiring Families, and it highlights initiatives families have tried, from creating secondary suites to sharing support resources to creating even a nonprofit organization. And of course, there's a DSO toolkit, the housing toolkit as well, that provides stories of information, resources, guides, and tools.
And you mentioned the rent geared to income housing and also portable housing benefits. So could you explain those two things for people who might not be familiar with that?
Of course. Rent geared to income housing, typically someone would pay 30% of their net income for their housing expense. And again, given how high rents are these days, that's a significant benefit. And it simply starts with an application to the Social Housing Registry of Ottawa. So the drawback is that it's a long wait. It can be 7, 8, 10 years, depending upon where a person wants to live. And so in the meantime, families may be looking at other options, for example, below market rent units, which are not as affordable as rent geared to income. They're still much more affordable than private rentals. And then the Canada Ontario housing benefit. Now, the benefit of that is that if you make an application and deemed eligible, it's an immediate benefit. So for example, people who might apply in April could have that benefit within 2 months. The drawback of that is that municipalities can choose from priorities, 5 priorities. And in the Ottawa area, homelessness is the priority that they're choosing. But again, as we said, we will find people with a developmental disability who are homeless as well. And so they will qualify for that benefit in there. And then there's also opportunities for advocacy. That's this year's funding is geared to homelessness. That doesn't mean that future funding opportunities will be the same.
And what do you mean by below market rent?
Below market rent is actually a calculation. So the average market rent is set by Canada Mortgage and Housing. Below market rent is usually 80% of that average market rent. So as an example, in Ottawa, that average market rent might be $1,100, and 80% of that then would be what somebody would pay for a below market rent unit.
And how would a family member go about looking for an apartment that's below market rent?
Well, they would actually apply for it. So there's 2 applications, one for the rent geared to income, but the other one, again, accessed from the Social Housing Registry of Ottawa, is called a below market rent application. And again, there's a waiting list. It's chronological, so you will have a waiting period, possibly not as long though as rent geared to income.
And are the portable housing benefits also accessible through the registry?
No. Now, a person should be on the registry, on the rent geared to income waiting list, but at the very least, they need to be eligible to be on it. And so eligibility can be factors such as income and assets and so on. But typically, a person with who is on ODSP, with minimal or no assets, who's a Canadian citizen, would be eligible for the Canada Ontario housing benefit. For the rent geared to income and affordable, you would actually apply and have to move into a specific unit. For the Canada Ontario housing benefit, the benefit goes with the person. And so they can find their own apartment, and they could be living right now in the most perfect apartment and just need help affording that. So again, yes, I think if an agency is supporting somebody and they want to live independently and they want help with doing that, definitely that's something that they could do.
Okay, so that would be the big distinction, is that the rent geared to income and below market rent, you would have to choose a building that's already identified as such, whereas the portable housing benefits allow you to live in any apartment you want to live in and receive supplement to help you cover rent.
That's exactly it. And even better with the Canada Ontario housing benefit is that you can use it anywhere in Ontario. And so you might apply for it in Ottawa for the place that you're living now, but if your needs change or perhaps your family's moving to another city, you can take that portable housing benefit with you.
And you recommend that families register very early because you mentioned that the waiting list could be 8-9 years.
Yes, and it's something too that's new to the Ottawa social housing application form is there's actually a place where you can indicate that you have a developmental disability. And so that's always in anticipation that someday maybe there will be programs geared specifically to people with a developmental disability, and on a list of over 12 or 13,000 people, that checkbox will make it easier to find people who qualify.
Here's the advice Pam and Chris give to parents and self-advocates.
I would say, think of getting housing for your child, like building a foundation of a house. Build the foundation. Sign your child up for every possible service, every organization that supports your child. So we're talking about DSO, ODSP when they're old enough, tax credits, service coordination, social housing registry, RDSPs. I think it's really important for parents to take on that responsibility. Not to hide your head in the sand, but take it on. That is our role as families, as parents, and to lay that groundwork, to lay the foundation. And then several years before they need to be moving out of the house, or you predict they might want to, do a whole round of calling all these organizations to find out everything they know. You need to get into your head. So what do I know? What don't I know? What do I need to know? And that step is not, I'm going to solve the problem by calling this agency, but I'm gathering information. I need the whole picture. You really do have to understand the whole system in order to work within it. So that's the step. And then once they're closer, let's say year and a half, 2 years, Chris, to maybe moving in.
Yeah.
You do that round of calls again. And the last question you ask everyone who says, no, I can't help you is, who should I talk to?
Right.
Who's next? And just keep asking questions.
One piece of advice that I would say with regards to the organizations and things like that is, as early as you're comfortable, even when your son or daughter is a child, to get them on the social housing registry, because the waiting list is years and years and years long. And that is literally the only option where you'll find bricks and mortar, the possibility of bricks and mortar. So get them on the social housing registry as early as you can.
Finding other families who think the way you think, who have sort of the same philosophy. I think Chris and I both have raised our children right from the get-go to be as independent as they possibly can. And we want that. We haven't changed. That hasn't changed for us, that desire for our children to be able to be independent. And so find other families, because not only for the practical aspect of being able to potentially share a home together, but also because this is really hard work. Yes. You are going to want to cry at times, and you need someone to be able to talk to. Yeah. So it's both that boosting each other up and then emotional support as well as practical. So finding other like-minded families, key.
Yeah, it is absolutely the the most necessary thing. I don't think you should try and do this on your own. It's a lot of work, and you need a lot of support, basically.
Chris and Pam speak to the importance of connecting with other families. How necessary is it for families and individuals to build a circle of support or a network of support, Martha?
Well, I think it's very important. And whether that circle or network is formal or informal, it's important to the sustainability of an individual's housing and support plan. It helps to know that you have other people in your life and your family members' life that can share not just in the journey of creating a housing and support plan, but ensuring that the life that a person and their child envisions is sustainable.
How can families and people with intellectual disability build those connections?
Well, we have a tool in the DSO housing toolkit called the Relationship Circle. And families can use this tool to help identify the people already in their lives and how they're connected to them or their family member. And it's a great visual. In that tool, the person at the center is the individual who's hoping to live independently. And the closer the ring, the closer the individual is to you. And what the goal is to bring people who are further outside your circle, bring them in. And so from there, though, families can determine areas where they could build new connections for themselves and their family members by bringing that outer circle in. And then they can also join family networks such as Family Matters Co-op or DANIO, the Disability Advocacy Network of Eastern Ontario, that provide information, support, and networking opportunities. And by joining these groups, families can meet other families and benefit from the sharing of information.
Right, help and share stories, and just like the story we're listening to here from Pam and Chris. And there's also independent facilitation here in the Ottawa area that's available through Able2. Now, families, I believe, they can use their passport funding to cover a certain amount of independent facilitation services. So it's not completely publicly funded, but there is some passport funding that can be allocated towards independent facilitation, and they can help also with building that network and planning. So I think that's good to know. And Véronique, did you want to say anything about the importance of connection and in your experience?
I have connections with friends, my family, sister, with the movement, with ESO from the movement there. I have connections with friends there. I do with Arch connections too, with my work. Yeah, connections pretty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's something that's really important also to mention, self-advocacy groups. So we've mentioned family networks, but also great connections can be made through self-advocacy groups. I just mentioned Le Mouvement, and in English that would be People First. And Arch is the Respecting Rights advocacy group. Both really great places to get to know people and to learn about your right to live independently in the community and to be included, which is, recognized by the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And as a country, we signed and agreed to that since 2010. So, it's not just a wish, it's actually a right, and, we're working towards that. It's not a reality yet, but hopefully it will become for everyone, regardless of the level of support that they need. Any last piece of advice that you would like to give families or people labeled with an intellectual disability who are really hoping to live in the community, move away from their parents, or maybe move, from a home share or from a group home to a more independent way of living?
Well, a couple of words of advice, I guess, and we said it before, start planning early and increasing skills early, and take, confidence in the fact that other families have achieved this, and perhaps learn from that, reaching out to other families, sharing, knowledge and concerns and challenges and successes. We find when we provide webinars where families are actually talking about what they have achieved and what they've tried, it has a great impact on other families. And it's nice to know it can be done. As difficult and as daunting as it can appear to be, others have achieved it. So maybe my 2 words of wisdom: start early and learn from others.
And get on the social housing registry.
Yes.
I would say follow your dreams, never give up. It can work. It can work out with determination, and ask help when you need help. That is always a good thing to know. And just pursue, learn small things at first and then grow from there, and you'll go far.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, please be sure to tell your friends, give a thumbs up, leave a comment, and subscribe.
This mini-series will not have been possible without the support from Ontario caregivers, organizations, and a very special private donor.
You can listen to the remaining episodes in the series Growing Independence on our YouTube channel or through our website at familymatterscoop.ca.
In this episode, note you will find additional information and links to various resources. Thanks for listening.